Joining us on the phone, we have Kelly Accetta, who Kelly is the author of the book, How to Defuse the Landmines We Plant in Our Lives. She's an internationally known author and speaker on gender issues, and she's been doing this and training women for over 20 years on 5 continents. She's herself experienced sexual harassment in the workplace, and she is here to talk a little bit about that and a lot about what has been going on, or what did just go on last week, as Disney discreetly cutting a scene in Toy Story 2 that kind of references what I would call a casting call sexual harassment moment. Here she is joining us by telephone. Thank you so much. We are just honored to have you, Kelly.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Crystal. Thank you for having me.
So clearly a couple of different sites picked up on this, as it was a discreet cut in Toy Story 2. And when we get into this, Kelly, I want to play that original casting couch scene. And to set this up, it was one of the gags in that sort of gag reel, if you will. It's a mock blooper reel. And the prospector character, Stinky Pete, who ends up being kind of the villain in Toy Story 2, offering Barbie dolls a role in a film for the return of a sexual favor. And at the time, this was probably one of those scenes that were written for parents, I think. I think Pixar and Disney, when they're talking about I guess, children's shows, they know the parents are going to be in the audience. There's usually a wink to the parents. And this was what I think people would consider a wink before. But let's play that original scene. It's about 22 seconds long here. And then let's get into talking about, you know, sort of what happens now in a 2019 Me Too world. So here it is, the original scene from Toy Story 2.
Action.
Bullseye, are you with me? Okay, good boy. Prospector, how about you?
And so you two are absolutely identical? You know, I'm sure I could get you a part in Toy Story 3. I'm sorry, are we back? Oh, all right, girls. Lovely talking with you. Yes, anytime you'd like some tips on acting, I'd be glad to chat with you. All right, off you go then.
So that is from the original Toy Story 2, Kelly, and that is the scene that has been cut. So I think a lot of folks wondering if this is necessary, or if even more, should other Hollywood agencies start to look at deleting scenes from films that are particularly aimed at young viewers. So what was your take first, Kelly, on that original scene?
Well, again, it's not like they portrayed Woody, who is the hero and the beloved character, as the character doing something inappropriate and rude. They took the bad guy. And it was just, it was, to me, and as if it's a wink to the parents, I think most adults can have enough common sense to say, yeah, what a scumbag. He was a scumbag in the movie. Yep. He's going to be a scumbag in the blooper reel. And it just concerns me, Crystal. It just concerns me that as a nation, we're going to try and start to sanitize and homogenize all of our film and our books and our TV and everything out there. We, God forbid, offend someone. And so it's a chapter in my book about being offendable, because it's not that I endured sexual harassment in the workplace. I get it. I totally get it. But I've handled that emotional landmine so that when I see it, it doesn't trigger a reaction in me. And that's really the root of being offended by anything. It's not the actual thing that you're seeing or it's coming up right there. It hits something that usually happened many years ago that was unresolved, and it triggers a response. And, when we start censoring things, it's a really slippery slope. And what's worse is that it removes the ability to have conversations about something. And, everyone wants to stop talking about everything. Everyone doesn't want to talk to someone who doesn't think like them, be around someone who doesn't act like them. And that's not what humanity is all about. We need to embrace our differences and be able to have conversations about things in a respectful, loving way. And even this, if there was a teenager who saw this and maybe had a coach do something similar at their basketball practice. Now they're saying, oh, that's creepy. It's just creepy, Mom. Like, my coach was acting like that to me, and it just creeped me out. It opens up the door to have conversations about things, because just by sanitizing everything, it's not going to take away bad people from doing bad things. That's not going to. It's not going to curb what's actually going on in the world, but now it's just we're not going to talk about it. It's not going to be around to have a conversation about, and to me, that's unhealthy.
Well, and I think, some of the folks that have been applauding Disney's decision to do this have said, well, this is a cartoon. It's aimed at young people. Maybe more people should be behaving in this way, and maybe it should not have been in the film in the first place. My thought about what you're talking about is when I see any opportunity to talk to my children or my nieces and nephews who are in different age ranges, but I remember this with my own boys who are now teenagers, that you want those opportunities to talk about what being portrayed on film, and to be able to teach them lessons, everything from, I've had conversations with my boys about somebody drinking at a bar in a movie who's taking a lot of shots in a row, and I paused and said, they would probably be on the floor in real life if this happened. I just want to, give them the reality check here of what is being portrayed. And what you're saying, though, is if we start to just homogenize and take everything out that has already been in place, already a part of our pop culture for decades, that we are going to lose those opportunities, and that's not a good thing.
I don't feel it is. And, if you just look back at the 50s, they tried to do that in the 50s. And again, if we ignore our history, we're doomed to repeat it. I mean, look at all of the TV shows and the movies and everything. People were trying to just take any reference of sex or violence or anything out. That didn't change that we live in a really messed up world. And so now you had kids watching these programs and watching these perfect people living these perfect lives with nothing ever bad ever being said or done. And when their lives don't match up to that, that's not a very encouraging thing for anyone.
Indeed. I want to talk about your book, which is, again, called How to Defuse the Landmines We Plant in Our Lives. This is really coming from your experience of helping thousands of women learning to avoid placing these and these types of destructive thoughts and landmines in their own lives. Can you describe, if you will, if you don't mind describing this? You mentioned you endured sexual harassment yourself, but your key here was to work through it so you didn't have to worry about triggers, right?
Absolutely, Crystal. And life is hard enough already. Women are usually doing 2 full-time jobs if they're working, and they have, a family at home. Life is already hard enough. And what I realized over the course of 2 decades plus is that women really struggle with the same things. And a lot of these are self-inflicted. They're things that we do that make life harder for ourselves. They're things that we do that rob ourselves of our joy. And when we talk about, enduring sexual harassment, or unfortunately I also was a victim of a sexual assault.
Absolutely.
In college. And, there is a decision. One of the books, or one of the chapters in my book, it's called A Victim Mentality Landmine. And we all, especially women, but men too, we all have things that are pretty horrible that we have to endure in life, a divorce of our parents, or sexual harassment or assault, or just there's things in our life. But if we don't choose to be a victor and move on and forgive and not let bitterness and unforgiveness settle into our hearts, then it keeps hurting us for the entirety of our life. That person who did something to us can now have the power, if we don't forgive, and that's another landmine, is bitterness and unforgiveness. But if we don't forgive, then we give the power to that event or that person to continue to hurt us and rob us of our joy for the rest of our life. And that's just something that I had to really learn how to do, was truly forgive my attacker, my old boss, people that have hurt me. just to really, truly forgive and find forgiveness. And by finding forgiveness, that doesn't make what they did to us okay, but it releases them out of your life and it lets you move on. Forgiveness, holding on to unforgiveness has been linked to physical problems, health problems, emotional problems. It's a horrible landmine that will literally blow up in our life and cause damage for as long as we hold on to it.
You know, I like that you're taking the position of, you know, obviously you have personal experience, as so many women do, of not only sexual harassment and but sexual assault, which I really want to make sure that we understand the difference between sexual harassment and sexual assault. That's one of the things I wanted the Me Too movement to clarify, was that the women who are saying Me Too over sexual harassment were not necessarily in the same boat as those like you and I who have experienced sexual abuse and assault. And we need to have these conversations. We need to take care of those who are victims and give them the tools to recover and heal from this. But at the end of the day, we also need to focus on the behaviors that are making this happen in the first place. Do you discuss in your book at all about, you know, about those behaviors from the perpetrators as well, and how, you know, we need to, as a society, definitely recognize this and not just continue to go moving about with, you know, eyes closed to some of these issues?
Absolutely. And I do address it, especially with sexual offenders. Harassment, a lot of men were raised, you know, without understanding what would offend a woman and what wouldn't. And again, trying to not offend every single female is next to impossible. Come on, you and I both know that there's some things we say in a group of our girlfriends,
sure, and
most everybody laughs and somebody gets offended. We have so much baggage that's why I talk about the offendability landmine. Is, you know, you can't expect everyone in your world to know what is offensive to you or what doesn't sit well with you. You have to be able to communicate that in a respectful way of, hey, you know what, when you said this, it made me feel like this. So, you know, I'm sure you didn't mean it that way, but in the future, I would really appreciate a little bit more sensitivity in that area. If we can't speak up for ourselves, we can't expect the people in our surroundings to read our mind of what is offensive to us, because there's no list that a man could ever read to learn everything about every woman that would be offensive. So we have to really take the role of wisdom for the men and share very respectfully, because we would want that done for ourselves. If we offended a girlfriend of ours, we would want them to say, hey, that really hurt my feelings, or that really offended me, because we didn't intentionally do it. Now, there's also the men that cross the line, and they're intentionally trying to use their power or use whatever to harm us in a sexual way. And I thank the Me Too movement in that regard, because so many more women have been willing to talk about it.
Yeah. Well,
I didn't tell anybody about my sexual assault until I actually wrote the book, and that's not a healthy place to be in.
Yeah. You know, I think it's important to point out, like you do, and I can't wait to read this book, Kelly. It seems like a really good, no nonsense, very common sense approach to sometimes a complicated topic. But I think it's important as well to point out that if you can say something to someone that have a conversation about your feelings, like you mentioned. If someone says something that you find to be off-putting or offensive, then you have that respectful, private conversation that says, you know, this kind of hurt me, you know, or this offended me in this way. And I know you didn't mean for it to be offensive. I'm just letting you know how I felt about it for the future. And I think 95% of the time you're going to have someone who meets that with gratitude for being told and is now very educated and aware about how this could be portrayed, or how some people, including yourself, might take offense to it. But if people cross the line after being told or cross the line knowing that something is wrong, then we have a situation of sexual harassment, and we have a situation of somebody crossing your boundaries. But in this world of social media, Kelly, we, I think, are very quick to speak to our echo chamber about what somebody did to wrong us and then shame that person publicly and, in most cases, before even having a conversation that would maybe give that person an education prior to the public shaming. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely, and that's, again, another landmine. It's the insecurity landmine. And when we are insecure, especially we as women, we can't wait to shine a spotlight on somebody else doing something wrong or find fault. I look at the gossip magazine industry is just repulsive to me because we as women are fueling the entire industry of gossip magazines. And they aren't $1 or $1.50. I just picked up a couple for a friend as a joke the other day, and I couldn't believe that they're $6 and $8 a piece. We women are so desperate and so insecure sometimes that we will go and read about everybody else's problems that someone's shining a spotlight on so that we can feel better about ourselves. And that's the thing. We are not here on this earth to destroy and cut other people down. We're supposed to be lifting each other up and encouraging one another. And if you want those type of people in your life, people that will encourage you and lift you up and tell you you're wonderful and congratulate you and be there to cheer you on when you have great things and be there for you when you've fallen on your face, then you first have to be that type of person. You can't attract those type of friendships into your life if you're an insecure woman who has to shine the spotlight on anyone else that's doing something remotely wrong just so that you can feel better about yourself.
And Kelly, thank you so much for the conversation today. The book is called How to Defuse the Landmines We've Planted in Our Own Lives, our lives, I should say. And it really does seem like a good common sense read here. I want to preface this by saying that you are an internationally known author and speaker on gender issues, specifically training women for 20 years. So if folks are listening and saying, well, men have those characteristics too, there's no doubt about it, but this book is aimed toward women. And you can pick that up on Amazon, How to Defuse the Landmines We Plant in Our Lives. It came out last year. Kelly, thank you so much for joining us today. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Crystal.